The grass was brittle with frost, curled in on itself like it had grown tired of surviving. A rust-colored dawn spread across the plains, thin and cold as blood on a blade. Wind moved slow, pushing through the cottonwoods like it had somewhere else to be. And she stood there, coat unbuttoned, fingers raw, eyes fixed on the crooked barn slumping at the edge of the property. Nothing had broken, not in the usual sense. No fire, no screaming, no grave to weep over, just the steady retreat of everything that once felt certain. Her name was June. Her breath came out white, but her face burned. The wagon was half loaded, its tarp flapping like it knew she wouldn't finish the job. A kettle clanged inside the house, left too long on the stove. She didn't move to get it. A coyote called out from the ridge, its cry sharp and strange, like a child imitating pain. She didn't flinch. 3 winters had passed since they buried her father under the cottonwood. A year since her brother took off toward Wyoming with a trail boss and never wrote. 5 months since the bankman said he'd come again after harvest. But nothing grew right that summer. The wind came too hot, too early. Then the cattle sickened. She sold off all but 2, and the one left now limped from the cold. She whispered it again like a promise. "We'll leave soon." But her voice cracked on the last word. A sound came from the barn hoof on wood, soft and irregular. Not the mule. It was gone. Shot after it broke its leg in the snowstorm last February. She squinted toward the open door. There was a man inside. He stepped out slow, hat pulled low, coat heavy with dust and wear. Not young, but not yet worn out either. His face was half-shadowed. He looked at her like he already knew who she was. "Didn't mean to startle," he said. His voice was rough, but it wasn't sharp. June didn't reach for the rifle. It was inside anyway. She just stood there, wind combing through her hair. "You lost?" she asked. "No." He paused, then glanced toward the house. "Your stove's about to catch." She blinked, then turned and walked fast into the house, bare feet cold on the floorboards. The kettle was shrieking, flame licking the sides. She pulled it off and set it down, hands trembling more than she liked. The man didn't follow. He stayed out by the barn, looking around like he was remembering something. When she stepped back outside, he had his hands in his coat pockets, staring out over the land. "This your place?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. "It was my father's." He nodded, like that explained everything. They stood in silence a while. Just the wind and the brittle sound of something loose tapping on the porch. Finally he said, "Name's Emery." June didn't give hers. Not yet. "You passing through? Looking for work?" She laughed once, dry. "Ain't nothing but debt here. I can dig, fix fences, haul, don't take much." She looked him over again. Boots worn but solid, hands calloused. Something about the way he stood, like he'd been waiting a long time but hadn't given up yet. "Don't have much to pay." He shrugged. "I'm not hungry yet." He took off his gloves and tucked them in his belt. His fingers were red from the cold, but he didn't seem to feel it. June crossed her arms. "Why here?" "I heard this place used to be decent," he said. "Figured if it was still standing, someone decent might still be running it." That hit her harder than it should have. She looked past him at the barn. The boards sagged like old shoulders. The fence posts leaned. But they were still standing, just barely. Inside her chest, something shifted. "You want work?" she asked. "You can start with the well. Bucket line snapped last week." He nodded once. "All right." She turned and walked back toward the house, not looking to see if he followed, but she heard his steps crunch the frost behind her. Later, after the sun rose higher and the wind died down a little, she brought him a tin mug of coffee. He took it with a quiet, "Thank you," and she watched the steam rise between them. He didn't ask how long she'd been alone, and she didn't ask where he came from. Not yet. The days did not grow easier, but they grew familiar. Emery worked with the kind of silence that meant something. Not the brooding kind, not sulking or suspicious. Just quiet. His hands were sure, methodical, the way a man gets when he's had to teach himself every trade just to stay alive. He fixed the well line before noon that first day, then patched the hen house where the roof had sagged. He didn't wait to be asked. June watched him from the window, arms folded across her chest, the sleeves of her coat still dusted with frost. There was no reason to trust a stranger. But there he was, kneeling in the snow mud, pulling splintered wood from the ground like it was something sacred. By the third day, he had set a new beam across the barn loft. She offered him beans and cornbread in a tin bowl, and he ate without comment. He never asked about her brother or the land note or the absence of neighbors. Maybe he knew not to. On the fifth day, she found him standing in the back field, staring at the long slope of earth where the grass refused to grow. "My father's buried there," she said, not knowing why she said it. Emery nodded. "Looks like it. His name was Elias." "You were close?" She didn't answer that. Instead, she asked, "You got any family?" He watched a crow tilt its head on a fence post before it flew off. "Had a brother," he said. "Not anymore." She didn't press. They didn't speak again that afternoon. That night, the wind rose, the kind that lifts the roof shingles and shakes window panes like a drunk trying to come back inside. June couldn't sleep. She paced the parlor, then went out to check the shutters. Emery was already on the porch, coat thrown over his shoulders, lantern lit. "You should be inside," she told him. He didn't argue, just held the lantern up so she could check the fastenings. When they were done, they stood there a while, side by side, the storm rushing past them like the world itself wanted to be elsewhere. "I used to like storms," she said. "What changed?" "They don't pass through. They settle now. They stay too long." He looked out into the black. "Some do." The next morning, the sky was bruised but clearing. Emery was already out chopping kindling. She brought him a biscuit wrapped in cloth and stayed beside him as he worked. "You ever run cattle?" she asked. "Used to, before the droughts hit us bad." "Where?" He leaned on the axe. "Oklahoma Territory, but we were pushed off the land." She nodded, understanding more than she let on. That afternoon, she gave him a real chore, hitching the remaining horse and carting back what lumber was left from the collapsed shed. He didn't ask why she was bothering to rebuild when the bank would come before spring. He just did it. After, as the sun dropped and the air turned sharp, he found her out by the fence line with her sleeves rolled, tying new wire. "You don't have to do all this yourself," he said. "No one else will," she answered, her jaw tight. He handed her a pair of better gloves, not saying where he'd found them. She took them, but didn't thank him. Later, over supper, she looked at him a long time and said, "You planning on staying past the thaw?" He didn't blink. "If you want me to." She didn't speak again for a full minute. Then, "Well, then you'd better get to fixing the west roof before it caves in. Ain't much good waiting until after it does." Something in his face softened, but he didn't smile. She liked that. Smiles, she'd learned, could lie. They spent more time side by side after that, mending fences, feeding the stock, digging out the frozen creek lines. He asked questions without asking, paying attention to what she fixed, what she avoided, what made her mouth go hard. And she learned things, too. He could quote old scripture without sounding like a preacher. He kept a small carved horse in his pocket, worn smooth from being handled. His back had a strange twist, likely from a break that never healed right. And he never said grace out loud, but he always paused before he ate. The days grew longer. The ground softened. So did she. Not all at once. But one morning, she caught herself watching him from the porch, coffee in hand, and instead of bracing for what could go wrong, she just breathed. Stay with us for more tales where mercy defies the rope and love outlives the law. Subscribe now. The thaw came slow, as if the land wasn't sure it was safe to wake. Patches of snow clung to the hollows long after the first warm winds. Mud sucked at boots and wagon wheels. The creek broke open with a groan, then rushed wild for 2 days before settling into its spring rhythm. Emery worked like he always had, steady and without fuss. But there was a new ease between them now. Fewer silences were weighted, She asked if he wanted sugar in his coffee. He left his hat on the hook instead of the chair. One morning, while mending a gate near the south pasture, she said his name, just his name, and the way he looked up at her, quick but gentle, made something go still inside her chest. She didn't speak after that, just turned back to the hinge and kept working. He stayed beside her, quiet. That night, over dinner, he asked, "You ever think about selling this place?" She didn't answer right away. "Not to run," she said finally, "but sometimes I think it might be easier to let it go before it kills me." He nodded. "What would you do instead?" "Go north, find work in one of those mill towns, maybe Helena or Billings." "You'd be all right in town?" "I'd get by." She didn't say what she'd miss. The sound of the cottonwoods in wind, the creek at dawn, the feel of a place shaped by her father's hands. "You?" she asked. "You ever think about settling?" Emery leaned back, wiping his mouth with the side of his hand. "I've thought about it more lately." Something warm flickered low in her gut, but she didn't show it. "Maybe I'd raise chickens," he added, dry. She almost smiled. They were good days, mostly. He repaired the west roof. She taught him how to coax the stubborn cow to milk. He fixed her father's old pocket watch and left it on the windowsill without a word. She stitched the rip in his coat sleeve after he gashed it, hauling lumber, though she didn't tell him she'd done it until he noticed days later. Still, not all days were light. One afternoon, a rider came up the lane. Brown coat, wide hat, clean boots. June stepped onto the porch before Emery could. "Miss Connolly," the rider said, nodding polite. "Name's Boone Kelly. I represent First Montana Land and Holdings." She knew the name, knew the voice type too. "I'm just here to remind you," he went on, "that per the agreement, any outstanding balance after the 1st of June will require action. Legal action." June said nothing. Boone looked past her at the barn, the stacked wood, the mended roof. "Looks like you've been putting in the work. Shame to lose it now." Emery came out then. Didn't say anything. Just stood there beside her, broad and still. Boone's smile twitched. He tipped his hat. "We'll be in touch." They watched him ride away, the hooves of his horse clapping too neat on the muddy road. Inside, June paced, fists clenched. Emery sat by the stove, watching her without interruption. "I don't have what they want," she said. "Even if I sell the last head and pawn the sewing machine, it won't make the difference." He looked down at his hands. "You don't have to do it alone. I've always done it alone. I know. But you don't have to." She stared at him. "You offering money?" she asked. "No," he said. "I'm offering myself." The words dropped between them like a stone in a well. She couldn't look at him. "Don't say something you can't carry." "I don't say things unless I mean to carry them." She stepped away, hands on her hips, trying to breathe. "You don't know me," she said. "I know enough. You've been here 3 months. That's long enough to know what I want." She turned back to him, eyes glassy now. "I don't know if I can trust that," she whispered. "I'll earn it," he said. She didn't answer. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat at the table, arms wrapped around herself, listening to the wind push gently against the door. Not a storm, just wind. And in the quiet, she remembered something her father once said when she was small and scared of losing everything. "You don't leave a place just because it hurts. You leave it when you know you've given it all you had." The next morning, Emery was gone. The fire had been stoked, the coffee was made, but his coat was missing from the hook, and the horse was gone from the paddock. June stood in the doorway, hands shoved deep in her sleeves, breath puffing in the morning chill. The land stretched wide and indifferent before her, flat under a sky still pink at the edges. She told herself not to feel it. Told herself men like him never stayed. By noon, she had convinced herself he'd left to spare her the harder goodbye. But on the second day, he came back. The horse was lathered and tired. Emery looked the same, hat low, boots muddied, eyes steady. He stepped down from the saddle like he'd only gone to town for nails. June didn't move from the porch. He tied the reins, wiped a hand down his jaw, and walked up to her slow. "Went into Three Pines," he said. "Spoke with an old friend. Man owes me more than a few." She narrowed her eyes. "Why?" "Because I meant what I said." He reached into his coat and held out a folded paper. "It's a lien release. Paid through the end of the year." She didn't take it. "That's not your burden," she said. "It is now." "Why?" she asked again, voice sharp now, rising. "Why would you do that? You think I owe you now?" "No," he said. "I think I love you." She went very still. The wind played with the edges of her skirt. A hawk called far off over the fields. "I didn't ask for this," she said, quiet. "I know, and I don't know what kind of man you are when things go bad. I'm the kind who stays." That stopped her. Her throat worked, dry and tight. "You don't know what it's like to lose everything." He stepped closer. "I do. I just never found anything worth holding on to until now." June looked away, jaw clenched. "I don't want to be saved. I'm not here to save you. I'm here to build with you. If you'll let me." They stood in silence for a long time. Then, slowly, she reached out and took the paper from his hand, folded it, tucked it into her pocket. "That's not a yes," she said. "I'll wait for one." They went back to work that afternoon like nothing had happened. But everything had. In the days that followed, things changed, not in grand gestures, but in quieter ones. She asked him what kind of house he'd build, if he could start from scratch. He asked her what her mother looked like, and June found herself describing her voice instead. He drew up a new fence line, with her beside him. They argued over which corner post to use and laughed when they both ended up wrong. At night, he played the old harmonica from her father's drawer, not well but soft, and she listened from the doorway, knees pulled to her chest. Spring moved in all at once, sudden and alive. The cow birthed a calf in the wet grass near the creek. They stayed up all night with it, Emery holding the lantern, June whispering calm into the dark. She let him touch her hand after that, just once, then again, longer. One morning, while shelling peas on the porch, she asked, not looking at him, "If I asked you to leave tomorrow, would you?" He nodded. "If that's what you truly wanted." She was quiet. "I don't," she said. Later, she found him smoothing down the doorframe with a hand plane, and when he looked up, she kissed him. It wasn't long or dramatic, just sure. That night, she didn't sleep alone. There was still land debt, still fences to mend and things to break. But there was warmth now, a steady rhythm to their days. They were not healed, not whole, but they were trying. And that, she thought, might be enough to stay. The fields turned green so slowly it was like the earth was relearning how to breathe. June walked them daily now, sometimes with Emery, sometimes alone. The soil had darkened with spring, and here and there, wildflowers poked through, bright and reckless. She took that as a kind of sign, not that everything would be easy, but that it might be possible. They rebuilt the chicken coop together. She painted the boards while he hammered, and neither of them said much. But the quiet between them was good now, full. One afternoon, while cleaning out the attic, she found her mother's old ledger, small, bound in cracked leather. Pressed between the pages was a hand-drawn plan for a summer kitchen her father had once promised to build. She sat on the floor with it, dust in her hair, knees pulled tight to her chest. Emery found her there, hours later. She handed him the paper. He wanted to do this before the war came back. He looked at it carefully. "Still could. Would you help me?" He folded the paper and slid it into his shirt pocket. "We'll build it together." June didn't cry, but she pressed her hand over his chest, where the paper sat, and left it there a long while. That was the same night the letter came, folded neat in an envelope with no return address, delivered by a rider who said he was told to find her one way or another. She read it twice before speaking. "It's my brother," she said. "He's in trouble, real trouble." The note was short. He'd gotten mixed up in a land swindle down in Dakota Territory. He needed help money, maybe more. Said he had nowhere else to turn. "I can't leave," she said, pacing the room. "If I go, I risk everything. But if I don't—" "You love him," Emery said. "I don't know anymore." Her voice broke. "But he's my blood." Emery nodded. "Then I'll go." She stopped pacing. "No. You need to be here. For the land, the livestock, the note. I can ride out in the morning. You don't owe him." He looked at her then, quiet and steady. "I owe you." She gripped the edge of the table. "What if you don't come back?" "I will." He left before first light, took the mule cart and enough money to cover bail or bribe, whichever was needed. June stood in the road long after he disappeared into the trees. The days stretched. She kept busy, planted the first crop rows, cleaned the rifle, paid the blacksmith with eggs and cornmeal. At night, she stared at the rafters, waiting for hoofbeats. A week passed. Then 10 days. Then a rider came, but it wasn't Emery. It was a boy with a note and a bruised jaw. "Got your brother. Bringing him back. Had to trade the mule. Will explain everything. E." June let out a breath that she didn't realize she'd been holding. 3 days later, the wagon rolled up the lane. Emery was at the reins, dust-caked and exhausted. Her brother sat beside him, gaunt, eyes red, hands bound with rope. He didn't speak when he saw her. Emery climbed down first. He lied about what he needed. They were looking to hang him for fraud and assault. She stared at her brother. "Is it true?" He didn't answer. Just looked away. June stepped off the porch and stood in front of Emery. "Why'd you still bring him?" "Because I knew you'd want the choice to forgive him yourself." She turned to her brother. "You'll work off what you owe me, and if you run again, you don't come back." He nodded once, ashamed. She looked at Emery. "And you?" "I'd go again if you asked." June swallowed hard. "I don't want you going. I want you staying." He reached for her hand. "Then let's stay." That night, they sat on the porch, the house quiet behind them, stars scattered wide overhead. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You were right," she said. "About what?" "Not all storms stay forever." Summer came in slow and golden, like a blessing whispered through the trees. The calf grew strong. The chickens multiplied. Her brother kept to his word. He rose before dawn, worked past dusk, and spoke little unless spoken to. June watched him from a distance, wary but willing. Some things, she knew, would take longer than a season to heal. But not everything waited. She and Emery built the summer kitchen. It took them 3 weeks of sweat and swearing, scavenged wood and makeshift tools. She burned her hand once. He smashed his thumb twice. They laughed more than they had in years, maybe ever. When it was done, they ate their first meal out there under a sky streaked orange, with corn still in the husk and bread cooling on a cloth between them. No speeches, just the soft clatter of forks, the creak of the bench beneath them, and the warm weight of his hand brushing hers. He kissed her there, slow and certain. It was different now. Not the kiss of a man asking, the kiss of a man staying. Later, she found the carved wooden horse he always carried, placed gently on the windowsill next to her father's old watch. She didn't ask why. She didn't have to. Some nights, they spoke of the future not in grand shapes, but in pieces. "I'd like to plant more than beans next year," she said once. "Wheat'll do better if we dig the ditch deeper by fall. Maybe we could trade for a proper plow." He nodded, eyes half closed beside the fire. "And some paint for the barn." And once, when she was lying beside him in the dark, breath slowed after love, she whispered, "Would you want a child?" He turned to her, brushing a knuckle along her jaw. "Only if you'd want one too." She did not answer that night. But in the morning, she lingered in bed, longer than usual, hand resting over her belly, like she already knew. By late August, the bank sent another letter. But this time, it came with a formal withdrawal, payment posted, no further action required. She read it aloud at the table, and Emery only smiled. "Told you we'd stay. "You didn't say it would feel like this." "Like what?" "Like home." In early September, she brought out her mother's wedding dress, still wrapped in cloth after all those years. It was yellowed and small in the waist, but her hands shook as she unfolded it. He watched her from the doorway, quiet, always giving her space to decide. She looked up at him. "Would you wear a tie if I asked?" He nodded. "Even a blue one." They married in the back field, just the three of them, June, Emery, and her brother standing between the cottonwoods, with the stream murmuring behind them. No preacher, no rings, just words, honest and plain. "I'll stay," she said. "And I'll carry," he said. They sealed it with her father's watch and his carved horse, pressed into the soil together beneath the roots of a new cottonwood sapling. By winter, they'd added 2 goats, 3 more chickens, and a dog that refused to leave once it found them. June stitched new curtains for the parlor. Emery carved a cradle, even though she hadn't told him the full truth yet. But one night, by firelight, she took his hand and placed it over the soft curve beginning beneath her dress. He looked at her, wide-eyed, then smiled so slowly she thought her heart might break. "Thank you," he said. And that was all. Spring would come again, and the land would ache and bloom like it always did. But for now, they sat close beneath the low winter sky, wind rattling gentle at the windows, the smell of wood smoke thick in the air. The cradle sat by the hearth, and her hand rested in his. If this story touched a hidden place in you, don't let it end here. Subscribe and walk with us on the dusty road ahead.